This microphone does not amplify, but we are videotaping, and I have such a projecting voice I don't need an amplifier. I'm Arnie Bieber. I'm the director of the International School of Prague. We're really proud to welcome all of you on behalf of the school community. We're so excited to have so many educators, early childhood specialists, people who care deeply about learning and inquiry, all in the same place at the same time. I was trailing behind all of you as you were walking through the corridor in elementary school, and I don't think we've had that experience. I've had that experience where we've got 60, 70, 80 educators walking slowly along, looking and wondering what you're all thinking. This is an opportunity for all of you to learn from each other, for us to learn from you and vice versa. And we're so excited that so many of you care about Reggio and the philosophy behind it. The mission of our school is to inspire, engage, and empower learners. And I know that that's what all of you believe in as well. And in fact, one of our strategies is that curiosity drives learning. And again, I know that's why all of you are here. So I wish you a great concert. Concert? I did say I was going to sing something, but I won't. A great conference. We're so happy to have you here, and I hope you get out and see the city as well. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. There was something else I forgot to do. This is Dr. Cindy Vega, our elementary principal.
Thanks. He had to say my name because I don't know it. I also want to welcome you to the elementary school. This is a very exciting experience for us. It's been a long time coming. We have teachers who came to us several years ago who had experience with Reggio and kept talking about it. A couple of years ago, two of the teachers, Allison and Carrie, encouraged Corky Hawkins and I to go with them to Italy, and it was a wonderful experience. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to go, but if you haven't, we highly recommend it. We've sent another team, and another team's going next week, and we're all on a learning journey with you. We're by no means experts. We are really trying to figure it out as we go along and looking forward to learning with you and from you. And that's what this weekend is all about. So we have wonderful presenters here to support our learning, but we know that we'll be having conversations with all of you that will support everyone. So welcome, and we're going to introduce our presenters.
Hi there, I'm Carrie. I am pre-K teacher at ISP. I am here to introduce two people from Reflections Nursery in England. I'm not going to take their time away because I know they're going to tell us a lot about their very special nursery tomorrow. So we have Deb Walensky here and Laura Magnavacci. Sorry, I even practiced it with them and I still couldn't get it right. So they are here and they have a vast amount of experience about working in the forest and also being Reggio inspired. So we're really looking forward to learning a lot from them and from their experiences later today a little bit, because we're going to go to the forest together, but mostly starting tomorrow. So welcome to Prague and thank you for coming and being here with us.
Dwayne is going to be leading some sessions. Dwayne, can you stand up, please? Yeah, he's going to be leading the sessions on play tomorrow, so we want to thank you for being here as well. And we have a couple reminders and just things to keep in mind before I introduce Christine.
Hello, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet you, welcome to ISP. I am Teresa Belisle, the Director of Learning R&D. And our aim is to make you have a fantastic 3 days here. So please let us know if you need anything. Martina and I have tried to get logistics done as well as possible. Just so you know, hopefully you've all been on Wi-Fi. It's an open system, and we had those posters up before. We've also made a Google Plus community. If you search for it, Reggio Learning, Inspired Learning at ISP, we invite you to add your reflections, your resources, and we will also add from the presenters throughout the conference whenever they're ready to give us their materials. We really want this to be an outstanding time for all of us to learn with and from each other. So for the final introductions and to get on with our exciting day, back to Allison. And a real huge thank you to Allison, Cindy, and Carrie, who've really been the backbone for the educational side of this and planning and meeting and Skyping with our presenters along the way. So thank you to the Allison, Carrie, Cindy, and then we'll do, yeah.
And don't move. Martina, can you come up here, please? And Teresa, stay. So as Teresa pointed out, we're not a conference center. Obviously, we're a school. And when we offered to host this conference, we thought maybe 20 people would sign up. And clearly, we're a lot more than 20. The wonderful organization that you guys have been commenting on is thanks to these two ladies. They've been amazing, and we from our faculty wanted to thank them. So we have a little gift. We think you might need it. It's for a massage. Okay, now.
So I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Christine Chaille. We had the privilege of working with her this last spring, and she's just phenomenal. I know you've all read her bio. I don't need to sit here and read through it, but she's incredible, has a vast amount of experience, and we really look forward to learning with her this conference. So Dr. Christine Chaille.
I don't need to.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, good. So first of all, I want to tell you I will not be doing a concert. I do play African marimba in a band, but it was a little hard to figure out how to bring my marimbas here, so I'm not going to do that. You wouldn't want me to sing, that's for sure. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here. It is really exciting to have the opportunity to participate in this whole thing and learn from everybody who's here. I'm excited about our time together. And I'm going to be talking about what it means to be a reflective teacher, a teacher who has wonderful ideas, who listens to children, and who finds joy in the process of teaching. Loris Malaguzzi says, to learn and relearn together with the children is our line of work. And when teachers see themselves as learners, as co-researchers, as theory builders, then wonderful things happen. And I'd like to talk about that process, which is fraught with peril and joy. But to start, I want to share a story, of course, from a classroom that I've worked with. I've worked with a group of schools in Lima, Peru, a group of amazing Reggio-inspired classrooms. And I was visiting a classroom of 4- and 5-year-olds, and I was going to be observing in a classroom where a few days before, one of the children had brought in these large seahorses, dried seahorses, to share. And during the class meeting, apparently, they told me, one of the children said that they were dead. And another child said, no, they're not dead. If you put them in water, they'll come back to life. So an argument followed about whether they were dead or alive. So the time when I visited, I entered a small studio room where there were 4 children sitting. There's the seahorse. 4 children were sitting at a table where the teacher had put this large bowl of water, magnifying glasses, and paper and pencils. And they were discussing their predictions about what would happen when they put the seahorse into the water. Would they start moving? How long would it take before they came back to life? So one of the seahorses was put in the bowl of water, and they watched and watched and watched and poked at it now and then. And do you know what happened? Nothing happened. And so they were discussing why it didn't come back to life. And one of the children said it was because in the sea where they live, there's sand. So they had to go get sand to put in the water so they would come back to life. So they run out to the playground, they get sand, they come back in, they mix the sand, let it settle, which takes a while, and put the seahorse back into the water. And Do you know what happened then? And then another child said, well, you know, the water in the sea actually has salt in it. So they went and got salt, poured it in, stirred it up, let it dissolve, and waited. And they didn't come back to life, at least not then. So one child picked up the wet seahorse and touched its curled tail and sort of pulled it out and let it go, and it sprang back. And he said, look, it's alive. So they got a big argument. No, it's not alive. It just moved. So they had this amazing discussion about what it would take. What more would it take? And one of the children said, well, they need their whole family there to come back to life. So here you can see the teacher then brought out some materials for them to represent their thinking. And the time in the studio was over. So later that day, I sat down with a group of the teachers and some of the administrators at the school, and I shared this story with them. And they asked me, what should the teachers do next? And I said, well, what do you think the children were trying to figure out? What questions were they asking, and what were they struggling with and interested in? And we had this amazing discussion, argument, about different perspectives on what the children were trying to do here, what is going on in their heads, and different proposals for how the children, how the teachers should respond. For example, one of them said, well, this is really about religion. This is really about your belief in the afterlife, or, you know, what does it mean to die, and deep philosophical religious things. And others said, no, it's about transformation. So anyway, I was reminded of an episode that I witnessed in Reggio Emilia. I was in a classroom of 3- and 4-year-olds, and there was a large table with about maybe 7 or 8 children sitting at this table. And at the end was a teacher who had a sketchbook. And the children had clay. They were making clay figures, and they had digital pictures sitting on the table, and they had a video monitor next to the table. And they were working really hard and talking and trying to do things with their clay. And every now and then they'd look at a picture and go back to their clay, or they'd watch a video and go back to their clay. And afterwards, we sat down with the teachers there in that school and asked them what was this about? And they said, well, what they were trying to do is they've been out on the playground playing red light, green light. You all know red light, green light. And they decided to make a board game of red light, green light. And in order to make the board game, they had to have figures of themselves. In order to make figures of themselves, they had to have digital pictures. And then when they had the pictures, they realized they didn't show the motion that they needed to capture in these figures, so that's why they had the video. So they're working away on this. And so I asked the question of the teacher. I said, well, what were you doing in your sketchbook? What were you doing? And she said, I'm trying to figure out what they're thinking. And then she turned to us. It was a group of mostly Americans, and said, what do you think they were thinking? And, you know, I can't speak for them, but I was taken aback that a teacher from Reggio Emilia was asking me what I thought was going on with these children. But it really made me think a lot about the humility of that teacher asking us for our ideas, that she really had no clue. So I want you to discuss briefly with just the people right around you, what do you think is going on here? And what do you think the children were thinking? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to talk with each other about this. Now, I'm going to interrupt you. Now that you've had time to talk about it extensively, What are some of your thoughts about this? And what would you do next if you were the teacher? Anybody? Anybody have want to put forth a theory? Come on. Yes. Oh, wait. He would like to capture this.
We talked about the issues of life and death and the natural world, about what does it take to be alive and to be dead, and also the role of, the concept that young children really don't understand what is death and can't really get their head wrapped around that permanency. Anybody
else? Anything?
One of the most interesting moments in their discussion was when they made the tail move, because that seemed, I think children are interested in the ambiguous signs, so the fact that it was moving and yet they knew it wasn't alive yet was a very interesting examination of that line between life and death.
Anyone else? Well, we're going to let that sit for a little bit about what is going on here. Thank you. I meant it's not magnifying our voices. Yeah. And we're going to be exploring this afternoon the following issues related to this question of being a researcher and a theory builder as a teacher, of not understanding, in this case, what's going on with the children and the seahorses. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what does it mean to be a theory builder, the importance of intentions and the importance of letting them go, challenging our assumptions and turning to inquiry, paying attention with observation, documentation, and the pedagogy of listening, and the idea of embracing uncertainty and disequilibrium, the value of not knowing. So first, just briefly, I'm going to talk about what is theory building. Theory building is how I talk about the process that children can learn by constructing knowledge about the world. It's not just children. Teachers are also theory builders, constructing knowledge as they explore things. And I'm going to show you just an example of what I mean by theory building and talk about it a little bit more. I think it's nice to have an image in your head when you think about theory building. So this is a good image, concrete image to have. But let's think about this now. What do children do when they build theories? They first come to an experience with theories already. Children, I'm always amazed when people do something like sink and float activities with children as though they've never experienced objects in water. You know, it's like, so they come with their own theories to the experience, different theories, each from the other. They apply those theories, they make predictions about what's going to happen, and sort of try out their theory. One of the things that we all do when we build theories is if it doesn't happen the way we thought, we often repeat it, thinking it was just a mistake. And then we also then vary it to see, well, maybe if I do this, it'll work. Maybe if I do that. We watch what happens. And then based on this, we build more and more complex theories about the world. Now, this doesn't happen in this order, in this nice rote order, nor does theory building happen the way that little girl was constructing the cup stacking. But these are the elements that take up theory building. And teachers are theory builders too. So a useful way to think of this process that teachers use to build theories about the world and about how they teach is the framework of progettazione, which is the Reggio framework or one of them, for planning and implementing curriculum. And progettazione has two integrated elements. The first one is planning. This involves extensive planning that teachers do, that they engage in, planning in which teachers discuss fully all of the possible ways that the project could be anticipated to evolve, considering the likely ideas, hypotheses, and choices of children and the directions they may take. So this idea of intentional planning and careful anticipation of all the possibilities is important. And I think there's often a misconception about constructivist teaching that it all evolves from what children do, which is true, but it also includes careful planning and intentionality on the part of teachers. And we could go on and on about that. How does that work? But we won't. And the other side of it is flexibility. And that is, once you've made all these plans and thought things through, you have to be willing to let go of your intentions and of sort of not being bound by what you plan. I like this quote from one of the teachers in Reggio: "I work in a state of uncertainty because I do not know where the children will arrive to, but it is a fabulous experience. It is as if we are starting off together on a voyage. It could be short, it could be long, but there is an eagerness to do it in doing it together." So how many times have you anticipated and planned, and then the children surprise you wonderfully with a different idea about what to do with the materials that you've posed or the provocation you've put out? A good example of that is we were doing some work in my school where children had been doing all kinds of things with drawing in odd ways. And we had put paper on the floor and dowels with markers on them. And we had them sitting on the table. And the idea was they'd paint on the floor using these sticks, long sticks. Can you picture that? So we thought this all through, of course. And of course, what the children did, if you can predict, we should have thought of it, is they wanted to paint the ceiling. So they started to paint the ceiling, which in our school was not okay. And so we had to be pleasantly surprised by this wonderful idea and figure out a way that they could do it and respond in that way. But it was like, what a great idea. Of course, that's what you would do with a stick with a marker on it. So this paying attention, I mean, that's pretty obvious, but paying close attention to what children are really doing with the materials or the activity or the experience or the space is important. And Carolyn Edwards describes the process that teachers honestly do not know where the group will end up, and it makes this, as the teacher said, not only more difficult, but also a lot more interesting. So I want to give you an example, a story, another story. And this is from the Helen Gordon Center, the lab school at Portland State, where I recently retired from, but I still work with the lab school. And I want to talk about this second issue, the importance of intentions and the importance of letting them go. And this story took place during a year when the teachers were collaborating across the school. This is a fairly large school, on a year-long intention to focus on the big idea of transformation. So teachers were doing different things in different classrooms with different age groups, from toddlers, infants and toddlers, to 5-year-olds. And in the early preschool group, they decided to choose to start with the provocation of finger painting, because of its transformational physical properties. You know, it moves and changes as children work with it, and it sort of begs as a material to be blended and manipulated. So Julie, who was the teacher at the time, said the following: finger paint was introduced on an open table with smooth paper and plenty of room to spread out. It was my hope that the joyous tactile experience would lead the children to discover color transformation that was happening on their paper. So they got very engaged in this exploration of the paint on the paper, and they seemed delighted about it. But on their 5th experience, so they'd had 5 different long times with this medium, not one child had talked about color transformation. So the teachers continued to observe and listen to them as they worked. So 2 children started painting their hands and their faces. And Eliza made a fierce face, and she's a very lovely, quiet girl normally, and roared, delighting, everybody around her. So they all began, or not all of them, but many of them began this process of exploring paint on their bodies. So Julie says they had to go back and reflect on their intentions. And she says, with this turn of events, I begin to see transformation in a new light. Transformation for these children does not involve changing blue and yellow into green. It also involves transforming a blank sheet of paper into a work of art, and now transforming the canvas of ourselves into new characters. So Julie and Michelle, the teachers, ask the question, what happens now when the children are given the power to transform and explore their own identities? So the main players from the preschool, from this class, from the ones who'd been focusing on finger painting, accompanied Julie on a trip to the local toy store, and they had talked about moving forward with face painting. So they wanted the children involved in selecting the materials they would use for face painting. So this gave children the opportunity to be empowered to help choose their own materials, and they were really excited about this project. So in the first experience with face paint, a character was born. Eliza created a Luga man. She painted the bottom half of her face white and gave herself a red and blue nose. She tells a Luga man's story A Luca man has a baby. He has calendars. He has a dog named Stella. You know, Julie had all these great ideas about transformation and focus that she wanted to explore, but she was happy and willing and interested in responding to what the children had decided to do with this provocation. And sometimes we think we already know what children are doing. This is sort of another aspect to this. And the importance of challenging our own assumptions and turning our assumptions into inquiry. So again, it was Julie with a different group of children. They noticed an extensive focus on baby doll play, like more than usual. I mean, they always had some, but more than usual. Children were putting the baby dolls to bed. They were feeding them. They were diapering them. And what is your assumption about baby doll play? So what do you think is going on there with baby doll play generally? Just shout it out. Role playing caregiver roles, right? And baby roles, right? What else? Any thoughts?
Being bigger. Being bigger.
Being bigger, so maybe a power, something about power or...
Yeah, that they are the little children, but
yeah.
maybe they can be the bigger.
They could be
The older one.
the older one, yes, that's good. Anything else? Well, Julie says this: it's hard not to already reach a conclusion when you see a child rock a baby doll and kiss it and put it to sleep. It's easy to make an assumption about what that play is about. You might dismiss it as being, well, not dismiss it, but you might think that it is what their caregivers do for them. And so it's what they do with the baby doll. And that this is how they're experimenting with family roles and care routines. And this is the assumption, she says, that I jumped to at first. Instead, though, she and her co-teacher Jessica set an intention to investigate what is it really and how is it evolving. And she says, as we surrender that initial assumption and move forward with the idea that we don't know what's going on and what this play is about, there are more and more things that are coming up for us. It could be about this, it could be about that, they could be investigating something else. So one of the things when we study theory building, we know that it's harder to change a theory than to build a new one, to let go of a theory. So while it's important to go into our work with assumptions, it's also important to challenge those assumptions. So they start by putting out provocations of bath play for babies. So they put out a lot of different little tubs for the babies, and they show them videos of babies being bathed, including a newborn baby being bathed very tenderly. And they actually, while that video is going, they are bathing babies and looking at the video and starting to make some connections with what they're doing. And meanwhile, Julie and Jessica continued to try to watch what they were doing. They became increasingly aware that the children were showing a lot more nurturing, inclusive behavior. And they saw it in many other situations. They saw it with other objects, with figurines and other things that they were nurturing. They saw it with classroom pets and, just using other materials. And it was a new sense that they were seeing of warmth and curiosity. And this is an example. This girl had 2 baby dolls, and actually she was playing with one, and this other baby doll was on the floor, and she noticed there was a piece of cereal on the floor from snack. And she very carefully fed the baby the piece of cereal, and they hadn't seen that kind of sort of extension of this baby doll play before.
Baby.
So they continued to ask this question. Now this was going on over months that they were playing with the baby dolls. But they continued to ask this question. They saw more and more of this more extended nurturing of individual baby dolls. But what was going on here? Were the children dealing with some anxiety about the caregiving that they were experiencing, like going to sleep? Were they just delighting in the good feelings of caring for others? Did this have to do with relationships with other children and with each other? Or were they dealing with their own feelings of vulnerability in power relations? They had no idea. So they began to continue to ask questions and had more and more questions and answers. But here's what Julie says. So this issue of what is going on, Julie says, I go into everything knowing that the children can surprise us. A lot of that has to do with how I and we as a staff are set up to think about who the child is, our image of the child. If we go into it knowing that all of their play is about something, all of it has meaning for them, then it becomes a little easier to surrender your knowing and take each group and each child as an individual who has different interests. They began to see individual stories from different children coming out and noticing the differences because they had let go of trying to think this was a common theme of what was happening. And Titiana Filippini, who's a pedagogista in Reggio, says, you have to question what you know and activate your curiosity. You come to realize how many more possibilities there are beyond what you thought. Just as children need to construct their own knowledge, exercise their skills, and become aware of their learning, so the very same is true for adults. But it's a process that takes time and cannot be hurried. And one of the things to think about theory building, going back to that cup stacking video, is it takes time. I mean, that was a pretty quick process, but theory building requires a lot of time and support and opportunity. And in this case, with the baby doll play and watching it, it took months for them to see how it was evolving and where it was going. So how do we proceed when we do this? And the importance of paying attention to what's going on, to noticing, observation, documentation, and this pedagogy of listening, where we're really carefully trying to figure out, not assuming that this is what's happening, but really opening ourselves up to other possibilities. I'm so excited to hear more about what the other presenters have to say about this too, about documentation and observation, because it's so critical to what we do. I'll give you just a personal example. At the center that I directed, which was called the Early Childhood Center, I started watching the time period when the children were having snack. And at this time, this was years ago, we had it organized. So the teacher had them actually sit at tables with an adult at each table to have snack, and they had snack. And I was watching it, and I was curious about what I was seeing happening. This was a pretty significant chunk of time out of the children's morning. So I asked the teacher, what's the point? What are you trying to accomplish by doing snack this way? She said, well, it's an opportunity for children to talk to each other. I said, well, they're not doing that. They were actually not talking to each other. They were talking to the teacher. The teacher would pose a question. Children may or may not answer, but they were not talking with each other. So she said, oh, really? I said, yeah, really. And I took videos, and we talked about it. She hadn't even, questioned why she was doing it, which is, we do this all the time. So once she realized that, she said, oh, well, this is stupid. So we stopped having snack time and had it as a choice period for smaller groups of kids when they wanted it to have it. So they had a smaller place where they would sit together and they would talk with each other. Or not, or they would sit alone and eat, but that was their choice. So it was accomplishing what she set out to do, what her intention had been, based on my observation and then her observation of what was happening. So you can see throughout these stories that observation and documentation play a really important role in the process of responding to what children are actually doing and transforming what you're doing as a teacher. And so coming back to this, Julie calls it the baby love story, which I think is lovely. What did they do next? So Julie and Jessica decided to relaunch the provocations and make videos of their baby doll play, show them the videos, hoping to encourage reflection. And what was interesting was they loved watching the videos. Julie had thought that that would lead to all this great discussion about what was going on, and it didn't. So she was really disappointed. But they started to see these the responses to the videos coming out in their actual play. So then given more and more opportunities and materials and objects to play with, and the bath materials again, they saw they saw a lot more going on with the children's baby doll play. One video in particular showed a conflict over a baby doll. I'm not going to show this one to you. It's so disturbing. No, I'm kidding. But and the children, when they were watching it, they'd been all enthusiastic and happy watching it. When they saw that, they got very, very serious and watched it quietly and deeply. After that event, and we don't know if there's a relationship here, but after seeing videos and exploring this, the teachers began to notice more and more instances of caring and social interaction. So the social aspects of baby doll play became more overt. So Lincoln, for example, noticed a doll that was missing an arm. And he seemed, you can see his face, he was very concerned about this doll. He said, "Baby sad," as he showed the baby to this other child, Zadie. And Zadie comes to him and she gently takes the baby and traces the area where the arm was and showed distress herself. But she puts the baby in a stroller and says, "Zadie, take baby to the beach." Sharing their deep capacity for empathy and guardianship, they had different approaches. Lincoln talks about how sad the baby is, while Zadie thinks of ways to overcome the sadness. It was just a beautiful exchange. They also show a lot more cooperative play like that, including role-playing and conversations that were not occurring in their earlier play. They are switching responsibilities and have shared understandings. So I want to move on to talk more about this process of not knowing and being open to the unexpected. And how do you move to that? In all of these stories, the critical role of discussions and dialogue with others, children, with teachers, and with parents, was evident. Filippini talks about the importance of working together as adults, in particular, in exploring that, collaboration being important. She says, as we discuss and share reflections, we create culture. We consider what has happened and search for its interpretation. We negotiate to construct a collective understanding. Without these reciprocal relationships and processes of sharing, each one of us would remain isolated within his or her own perspective, and our system would remain fragmented. And Julie says it as, again, she's very articulate. She says, the best way to process the not knowing is to share it. A lot of times you don't know what it's about until you explain it to someone. You have an aha moment as you're sharing it. Or someone makes a comment that turns on an idea for you, too. The community of teachers and parents that you can bounce ideas off of can really help you feel safe in that space of not knowing. You can start coming up with ideas together, and those ideas can snowball. And Allison, another teacher who worked with Julie, said, for each other, we challenged each other all of the time, not just listening and existing in it, but putting up roadblocks in that process gave us answers to challenge each other and ourselves. We were not just in the river floating along. We were creating obstacles for ourselves. It helped us to become more certain of the work we were doing. Laura Smalgucci says, teachers must possess a habit of questioning their certainties, a growth of sensitivity, awareness, and availability, the assuming of a critical style of research, and continually updated knowledge of children. And again, Filippini says, the challenge is to approach your involvement in each event with your full intelligence and reflective powers operating on multiple levels of abstraction. You must be mindful that every way of defining a problem exists in relationship to all others. The goal is to try to think about all the connections holistically, not breaking down and separating each aspect. And I'm struck by a story that an episode that I experienced in Reggio, where the teachers in Reggio were describing this wonderful project where a child would sit in the middle of a circle, and everyone would sit in the circle and draw them from different angles, right? So some in profile, some back, some front. And they had all these wonderful pictures of the children and the discussions that the children had. It was just lovely work. And one of the people in the group, the audience, afterwards, when they asked for questions, she said, well, we know that children are not, at this age, are not capable of drawing profiles. And she said, all the research has shown us that, right? And so these wonderful teachers from Reggio just looked really puzzled, and sort of pointed to the pictures the children had done. But that's what I'm talking about, that holding on and not letting go, and the ability to admit that you don't know. When I first went to Reggio, the most significant thing was that first of many visits I've made there, when Sergio Spaggiari said that one of the things you do to do this work is you make a declaration of ignorance. That was so liberating for me as an expert, on early childhood, to be able to say no, to be in the moment with children, to not be blinded by your assumptions and prior knowledge, which isn't to say you devalue your knowledge and experience with children, but to be open to learning something new and being surprised. So I want to share a story. This was, where's Jesse? Jesse, did you work with Frank? This was Frank Mahler, was a teacher at the Helen Gordon Center, infant toddler teacher who died a few years ago, very young age. But he was a marvelous teacher. And this story is one of my very favorites because it captures this idea of sitting with not knowing what's going on. And so I'm going to tell it to you. And some of the words will be Frank's. So the context in which these series of stories take place is a classroom of 19 to 23-year-olds, toddlers, engaged in an ongoing project that begins with a sustained interest in a set of potato head dolls. You all know what potato head dolls are. You all know what those are? Okay. Whew. It's a classic. The children make a collective connection to these dolls and begin to put the potato head glasses on their own faces and on each other. The glasses are way too small, even for them, and there is much laughter and silliness about this, but the inquiry is a serious one and persists as the days pass. Carter, a particularly quiet and solitary child, has been watching the other children try on the glasses. He and Frank are alone with the potato heads when he finally decides to try them on himself. The ill-fitting glasses do not want to stay on, and the experience becomes difficult and frustrating before he abandons his attempts. Later that same day, Carter comes to the table to watch as Paula attempts to place the glasses on the baby doll's face. As she does, Carter moves closer and leans in, his face just inches from the doll. After Paula leaves the table, Carter takes the glasses off the doll's face and lays the doll down. He brushes just the tip of his finger lightly over the doll's lips and looks up at Frank and says, and just looks up at him, and Frank says, "That's the baby's mouth." He looks down and touches the tip of his finger to the nose. He raises his eyes up to Frank, and Frank says, "That's the baby's nose." He looks down once more and brushes the tip of his finger across the doll's eyes. Those are the baby's eyes. He slowly puts the glasses onto the doll's face without looking up. A week later, they're playing on the university soccer field at Portland State. Paula comes over to me to show me that she's wearing my co-teacher's sunglasses. And Carter immediately comes over to her and holds out his hands. During this week, he's been less and less the distant observer. Paula offers him the sunglasses, and he places them confidently on his face. They're still referring to their work as the Potato Head Project, even though it has evolved into so much more. It grows in several different directions simultaneously, and at this point, the children have moved to a study of faces and a more specific study of eyes. Images of faces and eyes, their own and others, permeate the environment. Transparencies of the children's faces are introduced into their ongoing explorations in the light studio. And they're immediately engaged by these projected images of self and the larger-than-life scale. They've established an easy familiarity with the overhead projector. When Carter places the transparency of his face on the glass, He knows what to expect. He turns to point to the image on the wall and then gets up and walks over to it. Frank's attention stays focused on Carter and his interaction with his own projected face. Meanwhile, Timmy has come into the studio and seeing the image of Carter on the wall moves to the projector as if to confirm its source. He looks from the transparency to the projection, studying both in silence, and then very carefully places the potato head glasses he's been holding over the eyes on the image of Carter's face. Frank says, "The resulting projection takes both Carter and me by surprise. Carter is delighted. He and Timmy have a good laugh, and then a big disagreement about who will get the glasses." And then Frank says this, "The image is gone. I sit in silence and wonder about this extraordinary moment that he has just witnessed, and about how many of these moments there are that go unnoticed in the midst of our busy days. I wonder about the ways that children make meaning of their experiences, about the ideas they share with us, and about the stories they are telling to those who will listen. In our efforts to document children's work, to make their learning visible, we need to listen more carefully, more intentionally, and with all of our senses. These extraordinary moments help us understand the child's perspective, and we hear, in the absence of words, their eloquent voices. I'm going to end these stories with my answer to the question about the seahorse, of what is going on here. And the answer is, I have no clue. And that I'm really happy to be in that situation and have no clue. I think that's part of the joy that we have as teachers, is the ability to be surprised and to be open to learning from children and with children. So I want to thank the teachers who give me, I'm very honored to have permission to use their stories with their blessings, and all of the teachers. That's Helen Gordon Center, by the way, if you want to know what it looks like. And special memory of Frank Mahler, the teacher. So thank you very much. So we could open it up. Do we have time for questions? I think we do. Questions?
Sorry, it's always me. I have a comment really more than a question, but this idea of not knowing, and not knowing on your own being quite different from not knowing together, really, and that when you're in that position of not knowing and you feel uncertain, you often, that's exactly the moment where you feel like you can't actually say anything, because how can you say something if you don't know? But it is exactly the moment that when you don't know something together, it feels very different from not knowing something on your own. So just to make that
absolutely and
distinction, really.
You know, that we actually have talked at length with the teachers about how this feels to not know, and how it's a vulnerability to say you don't know, to say that you're ignorant. You know, like I said, the liberation of feeling comfortable saying that is amazing, but it takes development. It takes socialization. We have tried at the Helen Gordon Center to create a culture where it's not only okay, it's actually really fun to say, I have no idea what's going on here. Can anybody help me out? Every month we call it First Wednesday at Helen Gordon, and the teachers bring stories that they want input or questions or feedback on and have a discussion. Not everybody comes, but it's that kind of creating an atmosphere where the new teachers see that the very experienced teachers also don't know things, and it is quite hard at first. But it's true, as teachers, we often have been socialized or educated in a way where it's not okay to not have the answer. You know, like, what do you say when a child asks you a question? I'm going to be talking about questioning. That's a big issue for me right now. What do you say when a child asks you a question? You know, is it okay to say? I remember the first time I taught college level, I was teaching a class in statistics. Horrible class. And I remember the point about halfway through the term where I realized that I did not know, and I had to admit it. And I admitted it, and I was able to actually become a better teacher because of that. So, yeah, I think it is scary, and when you're alone, without someone to talk to, I mean, it's scary socially to do it, but it's also very isolating to not have someone to bounce your ideas off of. It's important to set up those communities of practice.
Sorry, can I just say
Oh, wait. I'm going to get nasty looks from our video guy.
And that follows on from what you were saying. I loved the way that the teachers were so honest in their reflections, that often documentation that I do has to do with what the child is doing and how it links to maybe the curriculum, and maybe put just a layer in there about why did I put that provocation out, what was my thinking. But I don't go back and review my thinking, and I really loved, it was almost poetic, the way those teachers really deeply looked at how they had, what the children did with what they had put out. And that to me is something I don't do, and I love the way it was done. So I would change the way I document to have my voice in there as well.
You know, there's a wonderful publication from Reggio called The Black Rubber Column. Some of you are nodding your head. I don't need it. I might. I'm like a rock star here. And what's remarkable about it, I think what's wonderful about it, is it actually goes through the teacher's reasoning and what the children are doing, and how the teachers change and reflect on it. To me, that process, I mean, you look at other people are more expert. We'll be talking about documentation, but documentation is or should be a form of reflection and be a dynamic process rather than some beautiful thing that you look at and you think, I could never, things are messier than that as they evolve, and more interesting, actually, and that process is as or more interesting than the end product that shows you this lovely story over time. I mean, they genuinely had no idea where the children would end up. And, I don't know whether that would have been different if they'd done anything differently. That's not the issue. It's to be able to see how the children evolved and to be constantly open to new ideas. It was pretty interesting. Yes. Oh, you're right there. You can.
So that is exactly where my question sits. Is really so much of this I feel like is our growing our own learning as adults. But I was sitting and listening and watching, and I have this question. I said, left to themselves, children would develop these theories over time. The observation and documentation process allows us as teachers to better understand their thinking. But how is it that we are helping them learn better and grow those ideas?
That's a great question. That's my response here. What a great question. I don't know the answer. Actually, I would say that the kinds of provocations that the teachers provided, including providing materials that would sort of intensify the baby doll play, opportunities, as well as showing them the videotapes and using documentation as provocation for children's thinking. And they felt, and they actually talk about this, which is interesting too, they felt there was a connection between the showing of the videos and the play they engaged in, that it became deeper and richer because of that. We don't know if that's true or if it would have happened anyway. So you're right, I mean, we don't know. But I do think that it's not just for the teacher's own growth and learning. It's not just that. It's because then they can be more genuinely responsive to what the children are really getting at. You know, I mean, it does matter how you respond as a teacher. Time you give to something, how much materials, how you display materials, all of that matters a great deal in terms of where children will go with something and how to go more deeply. If they had, for example, in a really traditional program, had baby dolls in a house corner, right? And they played with them some, but they just they might have dismissed it as, oh, they're just playing with their baby dolls. It's not significant, right? Instead, what the teachers did actually said something to the children about how important this is, what the children were doing. That's another thing they're doing by listening, is they're showing respect to children through that act, which I think empowers children to go even deeper into what they're doing. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think you can't always see that the things that Julie and Jessica were doing were actively supporting children's theory building, but I think they were. I mean, I think that's what this is about. That's really how you support it, is by paying attention to it and responding to what's really going on rather than what you think or wish was going on, right? Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, you can't force it. You can't engage children in something that's not engaging. But you can sure deepen their engagement with what you provide and how you act.
I'm just thinking of... I'm thinking about what you're saying about the decisions we make in response to the children and watching them in the story of the seahorse. And I've a couple of thoughts. One is, if I were there, and my theory as a teacher is that they're making sense of what a seahorse needs to live, then would I put out other provocations that might explore my theory with the kids, like plants and seeing if they need water or light, and if the kids don't pick up on it, maybe that's not what they're exploring.
Right.
Is that what you're...
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That is theory building on the part of the teacher, is that you have a prediction about what you think they're doing, or what you think at least what some of them might be thinking, right? And so you put out a provocation to see, do they respond to it? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. You're right. But, and you're willing to be shown that that's not true. You don't push it, in other words. I have to say that the issue of the seahorses still puzzles me. And I was just back in Lima 2 weeks ago, and I said, whatever happened to the seahorses? And they said, well, I don't know, So, because here's what I started thinking about. So I think, personally, my prediction was that they were really interested in the idea of what was the seahorse's life like, right? That was one thing. But I also think they were interested in the idea of transformation, of something. I mean, maybe it's from live to dead, and maybe it's just from dry to not dry and moving. I don't know. But then I started thinking, what would I do to follow it up? Do you all know what sea monkeys are? I started thinking about sea monkeys, because sea monkeys come back to life. They're dried, and they come back to life. Wouldn't that blow their minds? Then you could think maybe that's something that could provoke thinking about this issue. I don't know. But yeah, there are many directions you could go. And the only way to know is to be willing to put forth an idea and see what happens. And then pay attention to what happens. I think that's what's important. Not to just assume that's where you'll go, but see, does that resonate with them? Anyway, yes. Are we help transition? One more question?
I just was thinking about all those things
Wait,
together.
wait. Just.
Often, I just ask them. I mean, I'm not sure, so we show a video or pictures or something that's happened and then put it back to them. Like, we saw this happening the other day and it's very curious, and can you tell us what's going on or what you're interested in? And maybe that depends, the response level depends on the age group, but I mean, then you couple that with being that teacher that's just sitting there with your notes and your camera, watching and observing and documenting their work, then you're really in that dynamic of co-researching and learning together. And it's a good place to be. And it was a really nice reminder watching the transformation of the finger paints, just that remembering, letting go of intentions and finding the balance of that. You know, when you see, like she said, days pass, no one had talked about color at all.
Right.
And, you know, but she didn't force that conversation. She just let it ride and then watch what they were doing. And there's also that element of restraint too, because I know as a teacher you get, or for myself, you get excited about the possibilities, or I get excited about the possibilities, and sometimes I want to rush forward because I'm so excited about what I think is going to happen, but then waiting to see where they're going to go, and then just asking them. You know?
Well, it's tricky because if you were to engage in well, first of all, these kids were too little, not the finger paint so much, but the baby doll story. They were pretty little to ask them what's going on here. But older kids, certainly you could say, what's going on? You'd want to be really careful about not to be, often our verbalizations are seen as decrees or have more power than other kids' thoughts, right? So if I were to say to kids, so did anybody notice anything about how the color changed? You know, that implies that that's what they're supposed to be looking for. And that can put a damper on the things they are already paying attention to.
It's the formation of questions, which is such a challenge, I think.
Yes. On that note,
Thank you. For the a bit older children, let's say if they all go different direction, let's say from like monkey, seahorses to go to monkey and things like that, is there the teacher or the things can be lost, or how is the balance could be done if all the individual child goes completely different direction? Because while you're telling, you always say they are all children, but if it's all A, B, C, D, all different children, what will happen? Or have you got an experience?
Well, that's a really great question. I really appreciate it, and it's a hard one. But I think the key is to, you often end up being selective in the direction you go in, just because you're trying to stimulate engagement in some direction that often you can provoke that interest, even if not everybody has it. But the other thing is to think of, well, what can you do that would give multiple opportunities for directions? So it doesn't close off one. They're also important. So it's a tricky balance because it's sort of moving a collective of children forward is a little bit different than feeding every individual child's interest. But often the kinds of things you do could allow for multiple entries of directions they might go in. So it's not a simple question. I do think that gauging some general direction and then launching forward with it to see if it pulls in interest is a strategy that I think is often more manageable for teachers than trying to do everything. So, yeah. Well, I want to thank you all. Oh, wait. Oh, no. Another question. Wait, you have to have the microphone.
So it seems a lot like the time is very important in this process, and what we give time to is indicative of what we value. And so if we're telling students that we value this experience and their process and their journey, then my question is, how do you give significant closure to that journey? And when you said that they didn't know what happened to the seahorse discussion, it kind of made me feel a little let down, because if you're going to spend time on something and such cool questions and engage in that kind of curiosity, how do you kind of bring an end to that honors what you had done, right, and also lets you gauge as a teacher, well, what have my students actually learned from this experience?
Right. Well, I want to clarify something about the seahorses, poor seahorse teachers. When I asked the question, there were people from that school present, but not the actual teacher that was involved in it. So I actually said, could you let me know? Because they may have very well done a lot more with this. I don't know, or maybe not. Because there's also time to let something go. I mean, maybe it was just an argument that didn't have deeper meaning. Although one thing Julie says is, you have to always think about everything has pretty deep meaning. And Filippini tells another story about a young teacher who was playing with young children with a ball. And she asked her, why are you playing with ball with these children? She said, well, because you can do lots of things with a ball. They can throw it back to you, you can bounce it, blah, 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 right? And she said, but what is the ball to the children? What is a ball? And the teacher, this was a brand new teacher, she said, what? But to really try to think, so why are you doing this? What is the child doing when they throw the ball back to you? What is the meaning of that? Everything has meaning. That's what's so amazing in Reggio, is the seeing deeper meaning, and even well, as they call them, ordinary moments that can be picked up on or not. You can't pick up on everything, but yeah, it's important because it does show a respect. I have another series of great slides about these kids were playing with in the gym with the water fountain, and they, these were little kids, so they were like, and watching the water go up, right? And instead of just saying, "Oh, isn't that cute?" The teacher, actually it was Frank, documented it. He took pictures of it. He let them do it. He took pictures of it, and then he followed up with the kids. These were toddlers, by going to fountains and exploring the way the water moved in a fountain, and looking at videos of fountains. And these are toddlers, but this was just a chance, spontaneous experience that became deeper. And what does that say to the children who were experimenting with the water fountain? It's not just a distraction, it's significant, right? So yeah, I think you're right. It says a lot about respect to children when you pay attention to those things. Well, I don't want to cut into your snack time. But thank you again. I really appreciate it.